Life has a peculiar way of surprising us when we least expect it. That day seemed as ordinary as any other, with the afternoon sun filtering through the windows of my car as I drove back home. Traffic was flowing normally, and my mind wandered between pending tasks and plans for family dinner. I never imagined that in a matter of seconds, everything would change irrevocably. That was when I felt that sharp, piercing pain in my chest, as if an invisible hand was squeezing my heart. I tried to keep control of the wheel, but my hands began to shake uncontrollably. The world around me began to blur, and the last thing I remember was the deafening sound of twisting metal as my car crashed into the crash barrier. The impact was brutal, but strangely, I felt no pain. Everything became blurry, and the sirens of the ambulances sounded more and more distant, as if they were arriving through a long, dark tunnel. The voices of the paramedics blended together in a confusing cacophony as they struggled to keep me alive. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights overhead flashed over me as the medical team rushed me to the emergency room. I could hear snippets of technical conversations, blood pressure numbers, and urgent orders for different medications. Everything seemed to be happening in slow motion and, at the same time, at breakneck speed. It was at that moment that I experienced something extraordinary. I found myself floating above my own body. I could see with perfect clarity the doctors working frantically, their faces tense as they performed CPR maneuvers. But what broke my heart the most was seeing my little Abigail, my youngest daughter, clinging to my limp hand, her tears falling silently on my pale skin. Yet, in the face of before I could fully process the anguish of seeing my daughter in such a state of distress, I was enveloped by a warm, comforting light. It was unlike any light I had ever seen before. It didn't hurt the eyes, but instead seemed to embrace the soul with an indescribable warmth. All my worries, fears, and pains instantly dissipated, replaced by a peace that transcended any human understanding. And then I heard it. A voice that resonated with infinite love and compassion, a voice that seemed to know every corner of my being. As I turned, there he was, Jesus, radiant and majestic, yet so close and approachable that I felt as if I were meeting an old friend. His presence exuded a calm authority and a love so deep that I felt completely overwhelmed. "Come with me," he said with a smile that held all the wisdom of the universe. "There is something you need to see." He extended his hand toward me, and without a moment's hesitation, I took it. At that moment, I felt as if every cell in my being was vibrating in perfect harmony with creation itself. We began to walk down a path that seemed to be made of pure light. Each step we took produced waves of light that spread out like ripples in a crystal-clear pond. The very air seemed to be alive, charged with an energy that nourished the spirit and renewed the soul. All around us, I saw figures dressed in white moving with an unearthly grace, their faces glowing with joy and peace. "Who are they?" I asked, although deep within me I already knew the answer. "They are the saints," Jesus replied, his voice filled with fatherly pride. "Those who chose the path of love and service during their time on earth." As we moved forward, I was able to take a closer look at these blessed souls. Some wore crowns that shone with an unearthly glow, adorned with precious stones that seemed to contain entire galaxies within them. Each jewel, Jesus explained to me, represented an act of selfless love, a moment of sacrifice, a decision to choose good over evil. As we watched these blessed souls, one in particular caught my attention, an elderly man who was approaching with shaky steps toward where we were. His face was furrowed with wrinkles that spoke of a life of service and dedication. But his eyes shone with a light that seemed to contain all the wisdom of the universe. Jesus greeted him with a hug that conveyed a love so deep that I felt tears well up in my eyes. "This is Michael," Jesus explained to me tenderly. For 70 years, he was a street sweeper in a small town. No one knew his name, few noticed his presence, but every morning he rose before dawn to keep the streets clean, always with a smile on his face. Whenever he found someone sad or in need, he shared his meager lunch or simply offered words of encouragement. He never sought recognition, never asked for anything in return. As Jesus spoke, a crown began to materialize on Michael's head. It was unlike any I had ever seen before, seemingly simple, but with an inner glow that seemed to emanate from each of its jewels. Each precious stone held scenes from his life, times when he had helped elderly people cross the street, times when he had found lost objects and spent hours searching for their owners, nights when he had shared his dinner with homeless people. True greatness, Jesus continued, is not measured by the applause you receive, but by the lives you touch when no one is looking. This revelation hit me like a wave. I thought of all the times I had sought recognition, of the times I had measured my worth by the praise I had received or the accomplishments I had achieved. Here, in this place where truth was revealed in its purest form, it all seemed so insignificant. We continued our journey down what seemed to be a great avenue paved with pure gold. The material gleamed beneath our feet, but not with the ostentatious shine we know on earth, but with a warm light that seemed to emanate from within. Each step we took produced ripples of light that expanded like circles in a pond, creating patterns of indescribable beauty. All around us, I saw more blessed souls, each with their own story of love and service. One young woman, who I learned had been a teacher in an inner city, wore a crown adorned with stones that sparkled in rainbow colors. Each gem represented a student whose life she had transformed with her dedication and unconditional love. Mary, Jesus explained to me, never had much in material terms. Her salary was barely enough to live on, but each month she would set aside a portion to buy school supplies for children who couldn't afford them. She would spend extra hours after school helping students who were struggling, and often used her own money to buy food for those who came to school hungry. I saw scenes from her life reflected in the jewels in her crown, sleepless nights preparing special materials for her students, moments when she hugged children who came to class with bruises and broken hearts, times when she stood up for her students to school authorities who wanted to expel them for difficult behavior. Each of these jewels, Jesus continued, represents a life transformed by her love. Some of her students became successful professionals, others found the strength to break cycles of violence in their families, and all learned that their worth was not determined by their economic or family situation. As we watched, more souls came forward to receive their crowns. I saw a doctor who had dedicated his life to caring for people in remote rural areas, charging those who couldn't pay. His crown shone with the glow of thousands of lives saved and pain relieved. I saw an elderly woman who had spent decades caring for abandoned children, her crown adorned with stones that held the laughter and love of each little one who had found a home in her arms. "Look carefully," Jesus told me, pointing to a young man who was approaching. "This is David. He died at age 25 in an accident while helping evacuate his neighbors during a flood. His life was short in earthly years, but rich in love and sacrifice." The crown that materialized on David's head was extraordinary. Though he had had little time on earth, every moment of his brief life had been filled with acts of kindness and courage. The jewels in his crown shone with a particular intensity, showing scenes from his final day. The rising water, the cries for help, his unwavering determination as he helped family after family to safety until finally, he gave his life for others. Jesus said softly, "There is no greater love than this." I felt a lump in my throat as I watched the final scene played out on one of the jewels, David pushing a small boy into the arms of rescuers moments before the current swept him away. His sacrifice had saved dozens of lives. We continued on our tour, each step revealing new wonders. We came to a garden of indescribable beauty, where every flower seemed to be made of crystallized light. The colors were more vibrant than anything I had ever seen on earth, and the air was filled with a soft music that seemed to emanate from the flowers themselves. "This is the Garden of Secret Acts," Jesus explained. "Each flower represents an act of kindness done privately, without seeking recognition or reward. These are the most precious treasures of heaven." I approached one particularly beautiful flower. Beautiful, the center of which seemed to contain a miniature galaxy. As I leaned in for a closer look, a scene unfolded before my eyes. An older woman quietly buying groceries for a family in need and leaving them on their doorstep in the middle of the night, leaving no note or expectation of thanks. The purity of that act made the flower shine with an especially bright light. Each flower here, Jesus continued as we walked along paths that seemed woven with moonlight, represents a moment when someone chose love without expecting anything in return. Look at this one. He pointed to a delicate blue flower swaying gently in a breeze I couldn't feel. In its petals, I saw reflected the image of a young student who stayed after school each day to help a classmate with Down syndrome organize his materials, unprompted, unnoticed. Year after year, silently, being a faithful friend when others mocked or ignored. And here, Jesus said, leading me to a group of flowers that seemed to dance together, are the acts of love that transform generations. In these flowers I saw a single mother who, after working 2 shifts, spent hours at night sewing costumes so that her children could participate in school plays like the other children. I saw her sacrificing her only moment of rest to create moments of joy that her little ones would remember for a lifetime. Her tears of exhaustion fell on the fabric, but her love turned each stitch into an act of worship. The most beautiful acts, Jesus explained with a smile that contained all the wisdom of the universe, are those that no one applauds, those that don't get likes on social media, those that don't win awards or recognition. As we moved through the garden, each flower revealed new stories of secret love. A man who anonymously paid the medical bills of strangers in trouble, a little girl who shared her lunch with a hungry classmate every day without telling anyone, a teenager who spent his afternoons reading to seniors at a nursing home when his friends thought he was at sports practice. Look at this one, Jesus said, pointing to a flower that seemed to be made of crystal and light. In it I saw a priest who, for decades, rose 3 hours before dawn to pray for his community. No one knew of these solitary vigils, these intimate conversations with me in the darkness of the early morning. Year after year, while the city slept, he interceded for the sick, the lonely, the lost. The flowers stretched as far as the eye could see, each one containing stories that made my heart expand with emotion. I saw a teacher who used her own salary to buy new shoes for needy students, leaving them discreetly in their lockers. I saw a bus driver who waited an extra 5 minutes each morning for an elderly woman who had difficulty walking, even though it meant being reprimanded for being late. These are the true heroes of the kingdom, Jesus said in a voice filled with fatherly pride. Those who serve without seeking to be served, who love without needing to be loved, who give without expecting to receive. We stopped in front of a group of flowers that seemed to be made of liquid light. In them I saw moments from my own life that I had forgotten about, small acts of kindness that seemed insignificant at the time, but here they shone with extraordinary light. Every act of love, Jesus explained, no matter how small it may seem, creates ripples in the ocean of eternity. Sometimes the simple act of smiling at someone who is having a difficult day can change the course of a life. The flowers began to sing, a melody so beautiful that words cannot describe it. It was the sound of pure love, of selfless service, of kindness that seeks no reward. Ensa. Each note contained stories of sacrifice and selflessness, of people who had chosen the path of love at times when no one else noticed. This garden, Jesus continued, as we walked among flowers that seemed to contain the northern lights in their petals, is a testament that true love needs no applause. Each flower here represents a moment when someone chose to be light in the darkness, regardless of whether anyone else noticed. I stopped in front of a particularly poignant flower. In it I saw a nurse who, after her 12-hour shift, stayed extra hours holding the hands of dying patients so they would not go away alone. No one recorded these extra hours. No one paid for them. It was an act of pure love. The most sacred moments, Jesus whispered, are those that occur in the secret of the heart. When no one else is looking is when a person's true character is revealed. The garden seemed to stretch on infinitely, each new path revealing more flowers, more stories of secret love and silent sacrifice. I saw a man who for 30 years had visited his wife's grave every Sunday, keeping their love alive in the silence of his heart. I saw a teenage girl who spent her Saturdays reading stories to children at the children's hospital, bringing a little magic into their lives. Each flower here, Jesus said, picking up one that seemed to be made of starlight, is a reminder that true love needs no witnesses. These souls understood that true greatness is not in being seen by men, but in being faithful in secret. As we watched, new flowers began to sprout, each representing acts of love that were happening at that very moment on earth. A mother silently praying for her prodigal son, a child sharing his snack with a lonely companion, an old man writing letters of encouragement to prisoners that no one else remembered. The contemplation of the sight of these new flowers sprouting filled me with an indescribable emotion. Each one was a living testimony that even in the darkest moments of human history, love continued to bloom silently, like little lights of hope in the darkness. "Look carefully," Jesus told me, pointing to a group of flowers that seemed to dance with their own light. "These represent the chains of kindness that a single action can unleash." I walked closer and saw the story of a man who had unwittingly started a revolution of kindness. It all began when he decided to pay for the coffee of the person behind him in a coffee shop. This simple act inspired that person to do the same, and so on, until hundreds of people were caught up in a chain of generosity that lasted for several days. But that was just the beginning. Kindness, Jesus explained with a smile that lit up the entire garden, has the power to multiply in ways we cannot imagine. I watched as one of the people affected by that coffee chain decided, inspired by that random act of kindness, to start a mentoring program for at-risk youth. That program transformed dozens of lives, which in turn transformed other lives, creating a ripple effect of positive change that continued to expand like ripples in a pond. As we watched, the flowers began to interconnect with threads of light, showing how each act of kindness was connected to thousands of others, creating a luminous web of love that stretched as far as the eye could see. "Every decision to love," Jesus continued, "no matter how small it may seem, has the potential to change the world. Watch this." He pointed out a seemingly unassuming flower, but whose inner glow was extraordinary. In it I saw the story of an elderly woman who lived alone in a small apartment. Every day, without fail, she baked extra cookies and left them on the steps of the building with a note that said, "Take this. One if you need a smile today." He never knew how many lives he touched with this simple gesture. I saw a stressed-out businessman who, thanks to those cookies and that note, decided not to take his own life that day. I saw a teenage girl who, inspired by that anonymous act of kindness, started her own pep note project at her school, transforming the culture of bullying into one of mutual support. I saw a single mother who, on a particularly difficult day, found hope in that small gesture of love. "The seeds of love we plant," Jesus said as we walked among flowers that now seemed to tell interconnected stories, "grow in ways we cannot foresee." A new section of the garden revealed itself before us, where the flowers seemed to be made of liquid light and music. Here, each flower represented acts of forgiveness that had transformed entire lives. I saw a woman who had forgiven the drunk driver who had killed her son, and how that act of forgiveness had led the man to transform his life and dedicate himself to preventing others from making the same mistake. I saw a man who had forgiven decades of family abuse and broken the cycle of violence, creating a new legacy of love for his own children. Forgiveness, Jesus explained in a voice that contained all the love in the universe, is one of the most powerful forms of secret love. Because to forgive, when no one expects you to do it, when no one knows you have done it, is an act of pure love. The flowers in this section of the garden had an especially intense glow, as if the act of forgiving created a brighter light than any other form of love. I saw stories of reconciliation, of chains of hatred broken by a simple, "I forgive you," whispered in the solitude of the heart. As we moved forward, we came to a clearing where the flowers seemed to form a circular pattern, like a dance frozen in time. Here, each flower represented moments of intercessory prayer, people dedicating hours of prayer to one another. You pray silently to pray for others, unbeknownst to anyone. These prayers, Jesus said reverently, are like invisible threads holding up the world. Every heartfelt prayer, Every tear shed for another, every sigh of intercession, creates ripples in eternity. I saw mothers spending entire nights on their knees praying for their children, elderly people devoting their final years to interceding for future generations, children praying with simple but powerful faith for friends and family. And here, Jesus continued, leading me to a new path where the flowers seemed to constantly change color, are the acts of love that required the greatest sacrifice. These flowers told stories of people who had given up their own dreams so that others could achieve theirs, parents working multiple jobs so their children could study, older siblings putting their own ambitions on hold to care for younger siblings, people giving up promising careers to care for sick parents. Sacrifice for love. Jesus explained as the flowers glowed with a light that seemed to come from the depths of the cosmos, is one of the purest expressions of divine love. For in voluntary sacrifice, the human being most resembles his creator. Each flower in this section seemed to contain entire universes of love and selflessness. I saw teachers spending their salaries on materials for their students, doctors giving up lucrative internships to serve in areas of poverty, young people devoting their vacations to building houses for strangers. But look at this, Jesus said, leading me toward a group of flowers that seemed smaller than the others, but that glowed with an extraordinarily pure light. These are the acts of love that the world considers insignificant, but for heaven are priceless treasures. In these flowers I saw reflected seemingly trivial moments that they had changed lives, a word of encouragement spoken at just the right moment, a genuine smile offered to a stranger on a bad day, a hug given unhurriedly to someone who desperately needed it.